guys? Welcome back to another Election Forecast 2020 video. Today we're going to be talking about the recent primaries that occurred in Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, just to name a few, last night. And we're going to be talking about the implications that those have both on a national level and, on more importantly, the Senate map that we're looking at. Right now you're looking at my Senate predictions, which I showed in my last video if you want to go take a look at that. But for now we're going to look at the primary results. First off, we have this Kansas U.S. Senate Republican primary. This was the most important election of the night because if Chris KOBACH would have won, it would have opened up a path for Democrats to take that seat. But we're going to be talking more about that later with this map. Another important one was the 13th Congressional District primary with Rashida Tlaib and Brenda Jones, who was the former holder of that seat. This is a big win for progressives in the Democratic Party. Rashida Tlaib, famously a member of the Squad with AOC and Ilhan Omar and, a lot of other, new progressive faces in the Democratic Party. There will be more progressive voices, especially with this, with Cori Bush, an activist, member of the Black Lives Matter movement, beating the incumbent William Lacey Clay, whose family had ran that seat, as it says here, for 50 years. It's a huge achievement for progressive politics in the country. In fact, if I remember correctly, Cori Bush was part of that Netflix documentary Knock Down the House, which had AOC in it as well. What I'm curious about, though, especially with these two things, these are two big wins for progressives, but I'm curious to see if progressives can diversify their appeal, because as of today, you see progressives mainly winning in urban areas. New York City, Detroit, which is where Michigan's 13th is, and St. Louis, which is where Missouri's 1st is. You don't see a lot of inroads for progressive candidates in suburban areas, which is where the Democratic Party is doing exceptionally well right now, mainly with moderate candidates. So I'm curious to see if progressives can broaden their appeal to suburban voters, which I don't think is likely now. I think that for now, progressives will be mainly isolated in the cities, which will limit their legislative power, because obviously there are a limited amount of seats in cities. So I'm curious to see how the progressive movement goes forward after this in terms of expanding their appeal. However, let's focus on the most important election of the night, the Kansas Senate Republican primary. Chris KOBACH, as it says, a polarizing figure in Kansas. He's a very hardline conservative, very anti-immigration, pro-Donald Trump, pro-border wall. He was one of Trump's early supporters and has made his connections to the president, including calls between the two on immigration, a centerpiece of his candidacy to try and appeal to Kansas voters. Clearly that didn't work. Roger Marshall, the representative from western Kansas, won the primary, and that substantially shifts the 2020 Senate election map. So this is what I had predicted last time. I had both Kansas and Montana, two states that will go to Donald Trump by likely to safe margins in Democratic hands. However, in my last video, I was operating under the assumption that Chris KOBACH would win the Republican primary because he was the frontrunner. And as polarizing of a figure as he is, it is very likely that Barbara Bollier, the former GOP state representative, I believe, it would be likely to win the seat. Again, especially with their Republican background in such a Republican state as Kansas. Excuse me. However, this Roger Marshall winning the primary in this election substantially shifts the overall map. Now, I'm comfortable labeling Kansas as a likely GOP seat. In polls, we're on 538 here. You can see that Marshall is the only candidate who beat Bollier in a series of polls done back in June. However, you can see it's only 41 to 42. There are plenty of undecided voters, 17% in this one poll. And given that it is Kansas, a lot of those voters are going to break towards a more establishment Republican in Marshall. Whereas I think that if you can see there are just as many undecided voters in this one hypothetical between Bollier and KOBACH. And I would expect a good portion of the undecided to go to Bollier. However, in this case, the undecided will break towards Marshall, as I said, given that Kansas is a ruby red state and has been for many, many years. So we're going to go back here. And you see the balance of power is 49 to 51 now, making Democrats lead, or their majority, very slim. And it is unknown if they'll be able to pass substantial progressive legislation with only 51 with only a 51 seat majority, considering there are conservative to moderate Democrats in West Virginia, Arizona, and not to mention Steve Bullock, if elected, would be a moderate to conservative Democrat. So now let's discuss potential pickup opportunities for Democrats to expand their potential majority. As of now, this is my Senate prediction. This is what I expect to occur. But we're going to talk more about ways Democrats could expand on that majority. We're going to start with least likely to most likely. So as for the least likely states, I would categorize all of these likely states as the least likely, including Kansas. Bollier still has a path to winning that seat. Polling indicates that she was neck and neck with Roger Marshall, but I think Roger Marshall is going to win that seat, but there's still a slim chance for her here. And in Texas, I think Joe Biden's strength on the ballot can possibly, I don't think it will, given that John Cornyn has held a lead even in polls that show Joe Biden leading in Texas. I certainly think that Joe Biden will be the best performing Democratic candidate in Texas in 2020. However, although Texas is a pipe dream, it is still certainly possible. Mississippi as well, there will be a rematch of the 2018 special election between Mike Espy and Cindy Hyde-Smith. And while Mississippi is a Republican state at heart, it is very diverse and is becoming more diverse by the day. So I expect this state to be close within the likely margin. Not close, excuse me, but within the likely margin. It will go to the Republicans. However, it will be closer than other ruby red states. And as for Kentucky, the very unpopular Senator Mitch McConnell in there. Mitch McConnell is a brilliant politician. Like him or not, he knows how to run a campaign effectively, and not to mention he's in charge of the Republican Senate funds, so he can give as much money to himself as he wants. So Kentucky and South Carolina fit in the same category as Democratic pipe dreams against very well-known Republican senators in Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. I don't expect them to flip. However, there is a very, very slim possibility that they do, more so in South Carolina than Kentucky. And as for the next, actually, I want to talk about Alaska too. Alaska is a very interesting election. They have the incumbent, relatively unknown Senator Dan Sullivan running for re-election. He's just a freshman, running against the independent Al Gross, who was expected to caucus with the Democrats. This seat could shape up to be very interesting because Alaska, like Montana, has a very fluid electorate, and it seems that they have been known to elect Democratic senators in the past with Mark Begich. However, I don't expect Al Gross to carry this seat, especially in a presidential year with Donald Trump's name on the top of the ballot, given that he will carry Alaska, most likely. So I don't expect the seat to go to Democrats, or technically to the independent, but it is theoretically possible. And as for the next two, Georgia's Senate election as well fits into this likely GOP category. It started out as a potential flip for Democrats, but they really didn't acquire the best candidates. And not to mention the fact that it's a jungle primary, the top two candidates are likely to be Republicans in Representative Doug Collins and the appointed Senator Kelly Loeffler. So I expect this seat to go to Republicans, for sure. But Georgia's regular Senate election is more interesting, with David Perdue and Jon Ossoff facing off. Jon Ossoff being well known for his House run, his special House run a few years ago. This is a potential pickup. I expect David Perdue to carry the seat, but the lead is significantly slimmer against Jon Ossoff than it is in the special election. And as for Alabama, people are really discounting Alabama for Doug Jones, And frankly, I would count myself among them. I don't think he'll be able to carry Alabama, especially in a state that's, especially in a presidential election year with Donald Trump on the top of the ballot in a state that is as supportive of Donald Trump as Alabama. Um, Tommy Tuberville, his opponent in the general election, has tied himself to Donald Trump, and as Donald Trump either falls or rises, so does Tommy Tuberville. His his whole policy, it seems, is just being an effective ally to Donald Trump in the Senate. Um, so I think that Doug Jones, though a great candidate and possibly the only Democrat who can win in Alabama for the foreseeable future, I expect this to go to the GOP. So for all of these seats, I don't see a realistic shot for Democrats to carry it, bar maybe Georgia's regular election. But Iowa, I can certainly see going to Democrats. Right now, I have it as tilt Republican. A recent poll came out that showed Joni Ernst 1 point, 1 point ahead of Theresa Greenfield, but on the regular RCP average, Theresa Greenfield's up. I think that Donald Trump will run ahead of Joni Ernst, and polling certainly indicates that because Donald Trump leads in polling margins for Iowa, and I certainly expect him to carry the state along with Ohio, a very geographically or demographically similar state to it. But I think Theresa Greenfield has a lot of appeal as a farm girl, as she likes to call herself. I think she'll run ahead of President Trump, and I think that there's a real shot for Democrats to carry the seat by a tilt margin, possibly even lean. But as for now, my prediction stands as a tilt Republican seat. So, frankly, if I'm going to give the best case scenario for the Democrats, lean here, tilt in Georgia. That's the best I can realistically see. Even in a best case wave scenario, Joe Biden wins by 10 points. I don't think that Democrats can expand on this majority past 53 seats. I don't see any avenues for them to do that, especially with Kansas becoming more of a likely GOP state. So those are the impacts of the primary. If you have any other video suggestions, drop them in the comments. And I'd like to thank you for clicking on this video. And if you like it, subscribe, drop a like. And yeah, thank you for listening.